Hello everyone and welcome back to a short reviews video for March 2022. This is a monthly segment where I basically talk about those albums and EPs that I didn't really have that many things to talk about, so they're all gathered in this segment right here. You already know the drill if you are not new to the channel, and we have lots to cover in this video, so let's just jump straight into it. Diplo's self-titled album is simply forgettable. I obviously didn't get into this album with high expectations whatsoever, and I'd say that it could have been even worse. I think there are elements of this album that you can sort of find appealing, but for the most part it's pretty boring and with some really bland ideas, not really worth your attention. It's actually kinda weird that I ended up sort of slightly liking this album of Ghost in particular. I've never been a Ghost fan, I've never really managed to get into their discography. IMPERAY was an album that didn't seem to go that greatly, but I ended up sort of enjoying some of the changes of direction over here. I'd say that there were a few memorable moments over here. Obviously, it's still an album that in my opinion leaves more to be desired, but still kinda appreciate the effort with this one. This is a new album of the industrial techno group with a name that is hard to pronounce. I can't really say it's one of the strongest works the group has put out, even if it's still superior to some of the stuff that they've done previously. They've also done much better stuff in the past. This one kinda stays in the middle ground, and I also don't really believe that there is that much of a replayability value. I don't really remember much out of this album, and as far as I like some of the changes with the sound over here, it's still not really that much indicative of the capabilities of this group. I'd say that in comparison with some of the previous stuff of Silent Servant, this EP was actually quite decent. I liked some of the directions over here, even though it was a bit of a mess. We're talking about an EP that is 3 tracks, but each one of them goes into different styles and genres. And yeah, it is a bit of a mess, but I actually ended up liking some of the ideas provided over here and the overall dark aesthetic out of this. I believe that this is a really average EP. It could have been much better, but in terms of like trap and trap metal standards, it was extremely forgettable. I believe that all of those 3 artists could have done something better with this one, but it's not really there. MOTOMAMI by Rosalía is definitely one of the most intriguing albums I've heard all year. Now, it comes from a genre that I'm not really that much familiar with, and I don't particularly like it. I still believe that some of the moments over here cannot really appeal to me, as they're not really my style, and I don't believe that this album manages to do that much in order to make me change my mind, but I still really liked how varied this album is and how it actually ended up going into some unexpected directions. It was kinda weird, it incorporated futuristic and glitch elements, and I believe that this is an album that can actually pave the future for a more interesting direction of Latin pop and reggaeton music. I don't believe that is this much there, but it's definitely one of the closest things we get with the inclusion of the latest works of Arca. While it's a pretty inconsistent album and I didn't get the enjoyment throughout the entirety of it, it definitely paves a path for something new and refreshing, and I actually do look forward for the next step of Rosalía. This new album of the legendary Pink Dots basically suffers from the same issue that I have with the latest legendary Pink Dots releases, is that they're extremely long, to the point where they grab my interest with the first tracks, as I do appreciate the experimentation and how out there it is at times, with some nice combinations and fusions of sounds, but it quickly loses interest. After a certain point, the album just drags for so long. It has filler, really lengthy and slow-paced tracks, and yeah, it was another album from the legendary Pink Dots that in my opinion just ended up being quite forgettable. I'd actually say that this is the best thing that I've heard out of Blade and Echo 2K. I actually really appreciate this more synth pop and electronic direction that they took with this particular album. Now, I still can't really get into their stuff, and I don't really believe that there's something that much exceptional about the release, but I ended up actually kinda liking this one. It was euphoric, it was beautiful, it was soothing, and I'm actually looking forward and hoping to more stuff that would sound like this. In my opinion, this works better than anything else they've done before. Now, I haven't been following the latest works of Jason Crumer, and I'm actually now curious if some of the latest releases sound like thin ice, because I didn't actually expect that. This is mostly an ambient album, and not just like a dark and haunting album. No, this actually goes into straight up ambient directions for the most part. Now, you get just a glimmer of glitch and noise and a few chaotic experimentations and free improvisations here and there, but nothing to the point where it really distracts from the overall atmosphere that the tracks create. Now, it's not like Jason Crumer was mostly known for being that much of just pure straightforward power electronics and death industrial. Many of his albums are mostly known for incorporating heavy doses of ambient and dark ambient music, but this over here is definitely a new direction, one that is kinda unexpected, but it actually makes for kinda mixed results, as I believe that there are a few very interesting elements, but for the most part we get a pretty lengthy album that gets quickly kinda boring and repetitive with its ideas. I'd prefer for some of those tracks to not be that much one-dimensional, but still a really nice change of pace from Jason Crumer, not one of my favorite works of his, but certainly a surprising one. I couldn't get into this new album of Hot Water Music. Now, I'm not really that much into their style of post-hardcore and emo-core. It never really appealed to me, but I believe that this is an album that doesn't really manage to do that much in order to sort of change your mind and make it a more appealing sound to you, because I believe that some of their previous and first albums had a bit of a more effort put to them at least. This one just plays it kinda safe with a sound that sort of seems irrelevant at this point. Free improvised and experimental and abstract albums are not always great. It's not something that I always approve, and this is a great example. This is a free improvised album that in my opinion just sounds really poorly done. When it comes to the guitar sections, it just feels like a bunch of strings being played at random times, and you just get really lengthy tracks with a lot of empty space, with just a bunch of nothingness, just a really shallow experience. Nothing over here has managed to captivate me. When it comes to free improvisation albums, this is one that I ended up not really enjoying. Tropical Fuckstorm and King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard made an EP together, and it's actually more chaotic and out there than what I would expect, and I actually kinda like the approaches that it takes. I think it is a bit inconsistent, and at the end of the day I'm not really all that crazy about this release. I think it's just kinda okay, it sounds decent, and I like the experimental routes that they took, but that's mostly about it. This was actually one of the black metal releases that I was looking forward to the most out of this year. Tome of the Unreplenished is a black metal band from Cyprus, which in my opinion actually made a pretty solid EP a few years ago that I liked how experimental it was. It was a bit out there with a few noisy elements and just a quite interesting album in its sound, but this is certainly lacking over here. Now I know that they were obviously going for a different sound in this one, but apart from a few very good riffs, I actually don't really think the performances are all that great, or when it comes to the production I believe that it's just really dry at points. So yeah, this album ended up being slightly boring and was simply just expecting more out of it, which I didn't really get over here. I actually discovered about this group just recently, and it has a pretty nice combination of like power noise with trap and trap metal, but I can't really say that the execution is that much there. I sort of prefer the more straightforward approaches of the previous album. This one ends up just having a bit of a more variation to it, but I don't think that it's executed all that properly, and at the end of the day it sounds kinda simplistic and basic, especially for what it tries to create and provide to the listener. So yeah, in my opinion it's just a project that has a nice idea to it and a nice combination of sounds, but it's not really fleshed out to the point where I would be head over heels for it. It actually kinda surprised me how little I remember out of this new DECAY album. Yeah, for me that was actually a forgettable release. I'm fine with DECAY going to some more soothing and conscious hip-hop directions. I simply prefer his aggressive trapper more, and there are some nice elements over here. It is an imaginative album, you've got some nice bars, you've got some cool production, but nothing really shined, nothing really stood out for me. I get its appeal, but I don't really see myself returning to this album anytime soon. I believe that the new Current 93 album, it's just pretty basic for current 93 standards. I mean, he obviously has his own way of incorporating neo-folk with a few slightly more experimental elements and with lots of spoken word and poetry. This is another album that has a story attached to it. Beyond that, I don't believe that in terms of its ideas and the instrumentation and the sound that we get something all that special. I believe that it's just a pretty fine album, but one that I saw myself getting bored out of it quite quickly. Soulglow's new album is a nice combination of filthy hardcore punk with rap elements attached to it, and I believe that it's done quite nicely. This is my introduction to the sound of Soulglow. I haven't really heard anything out of them before, but this album made numbers, and I can definitely see why. Now, it's not an album that was consistently exceptional for me, but I definitely found some elements that I liked a lot. Finally, the one of them was the one and only trap song out of this album, which in my opinion is actually a really good trap song, actually one of the best I've heard all year. The other track that stood out for me was the finisher, which I found to be spectacular in its pacing, in its overall ideas, and just the final minutes of the song were super exceptional. I believe that there are some cool ideas over here. It's not an album that I see as a whole thing leaving that much of an impression on me, but I like the sound, I like the energy, and the execution is pretty nice for the most part. And that's all for the short reviews for March 2022. What's your opinion on any of those albums and EPs? Like them, dislike them, why, and what do you want me to review next time? Let me know down in the comments. If you liked if you enjoyed the video, subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for watching, I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye.